Episode 1, The Watts Murders. On August 16, 2018, the bodies of 34-year-old Shanann Watts and her daughters, 4-year-old Bella and 3-year-old Celeste, were found in a Colorado oil field. Shanann, who had been strangled to death at her home in the town of Frederick, was buried in a shallow grave not far from 2 giant crude oil tanks. The girls were smothered before their killer hid them in those tanks, 1 tank for each sister. The killer, 33-year-old Christopher Watts, Shanann's husband and the father of little Bella and Celeste, who also went by Cece. Watts killed his wife and daughters in the early hours of August 13th. And if that's not horrific enough, the story takes an even darker turn with the revelation that Shanann was 15 weeks pregnant with her 3rd child, a little boy she planned to name Nico. The reason Chris Watts committed these utterly gruesome acts would be told in his 4th account of the crimes, something some suspected all along. He annihilated his wife, daughters, and unborn son in order to continue his life with his mistress, a 30-year-old woman he began seeing a little more than a month earlier. Instead, Watts is serving 5 life sentences, 3 consecutive and 2 concurrent, without the possibility of parole. Additional sentences include 48 years for unlawfully terminating a pregnancy and 36 years for tampering with the deceased body. This is the story of Chris Watts. More importantly, it's the tale of how he expected to get away with erasing his family from existence and the mistakes he made in the process. Hello, everyone. I wanted to start by saying it was not my intention to cover the Chris Watts case for episode number 1 here at the Dark Bend. I planned to cover a 30-year-old missing persons case, a case that I had written about in a 15-part series in print. But I ran across some information about the Chris Watts case that really deserves some further discussion, because Chris has now told 4 versions of what happened to his wife, his daughters, and his unborn son, and he continues to inject himself into the headlines. Now, he hasn't been in the news since last fall. Now, his latest attempt, though, was in September of 2019 in a book called Letters from Christopher. Now, this book was written by a woman named Sherlyn Cadle. Now, the book is not on shelves anymore because it was pulled after it was deemed to be plagiarized. At least some of the book was plagiarized. This first-time author named Sherlyn Cadle took some writing from another true crime book and pasted it into her own, passed it off as her own. Now, she changed some of the names, but the writing was taken right from another book, and she agreed to pull the book from the shelves. At least there's some used copies out there, but I don't believe there's any new copies anymore, at least the ones I didn't see. Now, what is real, though, about this book are the letters that Chris Watts wrote to this author. And this author was, I think she met with Watts at a total of about 5 or 6 hours. She had countless phone calls with him, and he does depict his 4th account of what happened, and he now claims that this is the truth. And I want to talk about just one big question is, how did Chris Watts think he was going to get away with this? Is he a sociopath, a psychopath? Is he a malignant narcissist, as Dr. Phil, I think, called him? Is that what drove him, not necessarily to do the crimes, to commit these horrific crimes, but did his disconnect from reality convince him, or lead him to believe, if you will, that he was going to get away with this crime? That's a big question, and I think the timeline of events and the versions of how these crimes were committed will attempt to answer that. The first version of this crime is of course Chris Watts, his denial of everything. Right, he didn't know where his wife went. She went on a play date. Now, we see this minutes after the police arrive at his house with the body cam. Nicole Atkinson foiled his attempt to cover this up even more when she arrived at the house with a police officer. Now, the body cam footage, it doesn't take long for it to capture Chris Watts saying, I have no idea where she is. She was supposed to go on a play date. I don't know why her car is here. I have no idea why her purse would still be here. Look, here's her phone. I have no idea. I just don't know where she is. So we see that denial very prevalent. Now, he rides that denial all the way past the point of failing a polygraph test. And I believe that was 2 days later, 1 or 2 days later. It may have been on the 15th of August, 2018, where he continues to deny. And at this point, he doesn't reveal to investigators that he's having an affair. They find out on their own. Now, after he fails a polygraph test, Chris conjures up this idea that he's going to try to convince the investigators that Shanann killed the girls and he came in and killed Shanann because of that horrific act. He first, of course, tells that story to his father, and I will put the interrogation videos down below here for the viewers in the show notes for those watching here on YouTube. But he makes himself out to be a hero in this version of the event. So this is story number 2. He abandons the denial after failing the polygraph test. Now, he continues to try to fight this polygraph failure, the results of this polygraph test, and it's not until they move him to another technique, or another place in the questioning, and that it gets him to share culpability with someone else. So he's already, so right now he's admitted to murder at that point, but it's a different version of course, the complete denial. He claims he doesn't want to protect his wife, so he tells this grand story of how he just didn't know what else to do, so he disposed of the bodies the way he did. He never changes his story about that. There's no way he can, because there's nothing to dispute, nothing to refute where the bodies were found and how they were found, and really how they were killed. The medical examiners are very clear on the causes of death. But in version number 2, he is the hero. Now, this might really speak to some of his, I don't want to say mental health, because we don't know if Chris Watts suffers from any mental illness. We don't know if he's ever been diagnosed with personality disorder, most notably antisocial personality disorder, maybe borderline personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder. We don't know if he's a psychopath. We just don't know. As far as we are concerned at this point, it's not really believed that he has ever been diagnosed in prison. But there's some disconnect there, and I think there's some narcissism there. Dr. Phil calls Chris Watts a malignant narcissist. Now, this might start rearing its head, the narcissism, and maybe there's some sociopathic components here when he starts presenting himself as a hero. And what I mean by that is he talks about his claim that he saw Shanann kill his daughters because he just said he was leaving her and she lost it and killed her daughters. But he came in as a voice of morality and just took care of the situation. Now, he admits it wasn't the best choice, but he was the hero. He doesn't want to be the one to protect his wife anymore. It's really all about him. So that really kind of suggests that he may be a narcissist, if not maybe a sociopath, coming in and saving the day by any means necessary. And he says he snaps, right, and kills his wife in response to her horrific act. Now, snapping would seeing somebody kill a child what could cause someone to snap. He could have snapped and just saw red and did exactly what he told his father, and that he did the same to her. But that it doesn't explain why he didn't call 911 or try to remedy this, try to save his daughters. He just claims, they were blue, they were gone. So he rides this story all the way to, I believe it's the beginning of November 6th, when he takes a plea deal. He pleads to amended charges to take the death penalty off the table. And I think the prosecutors would have undoubtedly been seeking that, and certainly would have been successful. Now, death row in Colorado could be years and years and years. Would he have ever been killed or executed? It's not likely in the near future that he would have been executed, but he's doing 5 life sentences plus the additional 48 and 36 years respectively. So Chris is he's sentenced. He's in prison in Wisconsin several months later for security reasons. That's where he's being held today. When the same two investigators visit him to just kind of get a feel of where he was at the time he killed these victims, so they can possibly know how to handle future cases. That's the story that they give him, and I think there's truth to that. There's some theories out there that the investigators visited the prison. They visited Chris Watts in order to feel him out for possible involvement of Nicole Kessinger, his mistress. Now, I think they touched on it. They did talk to Chris about Nicole Kessinger, but I don't think they were there to fish for information because they didn't press him very hard. They certainly didn't press him using the investigative techniques, very legal ones, by the way, in his interrogation. They just brushed on his relationship with Kessinger. It was all about him. It really was. The third version, the confession that happened in prison, was, and he, during that interview, and I will put the links in the show notes as well, you will see that he's enjoying himself. He reminds me of a Scott Peterson in a way during that interview. It seems that he is enjoying being the center of attention, and he is the center of attention. The interview is all about him, and he makes it all about him. It continues to be all about him, and he again becomes the hero. In version 3, he takes Shanann out of the picture. She's no longer culpable in the crime in version number 3. In version number 3, he says he snaps again. He rages. This is where he says he had this argument with his wife on the morning hours of August 13th, and this is where he tells her he wants out of the marriage, he wants the separation, he wants to move on without her, and he quote-unquote snaps when she tells him, "You're never going to see the kids again." Now, this coincides with something that Shanann said in a text message to one of her friends, that if he divorces me, I'm going to go for full custody. Now, she may have been saying that out of anger. We don't know. She did text it to one of her friends. However, on that morning, according to story number 3, Chris Watts says that he lost it when she threatened to take his kids away and just choked her to death. And now, anyone who has seen criminal cases where a defendant snaps, knows that these types of situations are not prolonged. For example, when someone snaps, it's common, let's say in a robbery, they snap and they shoot somebody impulsively, or during a domestic violence case, a husband may snap and kick his wife down the stairs, and she breaks her neck and dies. Someone snaps during a bar fight, and someone gets stabbed in the throat. These are things where people experience a physiological experience that prevents them from controlling themselves in the moment. Killing somebody, strangling somebody to death, wrapping their body in a bed sheet, putting them in a pickup truck, taking 2 other victims, placing them in that truck, driving them an hour away, burying the first victim, then killing the second victims one by one and placing their bodies in an oil rig is not an episode of snapping. This is a well thought out plan. And Chris Watts expected these investigators to believe that he experienced this. Now, I don't know if this was a result of his narcissism. I think the way, now, let me preface this. If you listen to these if you listen to the audio of these video, Chris is having a good time. He's laughing and joking with these investigators. It's like they're college chums. It's an eerie feeling, and he does not sound like someone who is showing any sort of remorse whatsoever. Now, he can say, and he has said, that he doesn't show emotion. Well, you know who doesn't show emotion very well is psychopaths and sociopaths, and it's now they show emotions, but it's very, very superficial, and we'll get into that as far as the timeline. But Chris, he carries on very eerily, and it's very much like Scott Peterson again. And if you look at the Scott Peterson case from 2003, Scott Peterson loved the camera. He loved the notoriety. He dressed up in suits during his videos. He was on Diane Sawyer. He conjured up these tears. And Chris tried a little bit of that. Certainly not in the third video, but the third video is disturbing in that he jokes about doesn't joke about the murders, but he's joking about certain aspects of the conversations he's having with the investigators. And he is deeply, deeply concerned with how people perceive him. And that is a mark of a narcissist and possibly a sociopath, someone who is suffering from antisocial personality disorder. I've seen it. We've seen that in the case of Ariel Castro, who was obviously a sociopath. During his sentencing hearing, he was very dismayed, and you could see it in his face that he was extremely agitated when the prosecution and I believe the media were calling him a monster. Ariel Castro was that sociopathic and that narcissistic. He thought that much of himself, and any true narcissist and any true sociopath cannot be crossed. They do not like being challenged. They certainly do not like losing, and they certainly do not like to be insulted, because deep down a lot of narcissists and sociopaths are they truly have very wounded psyches. Now, again, I am not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist, but I will just tell you from a journalistic standpoint, and some of the cases that I've covered have involved defendants who have been diagnosed with these personality disorders. And Ariel Castro certainly is somebody who can be characterized as a narcissist and I believe a sociopath. And again, Chris Watts, according to the behavior or the audio of his third interview, or his third version of what happened, certainly exudes some of that behavior. It's eerie. So moving on to the fourth version, some of these letters are just they follow the same vein. And he's talking about this as though this was an everyday occurrence in the Watts household. And we know that's not true, because in the Watts household, at least according to Facebook, it was a happy, loving place. At least, and these girls loved their father. This didn't make any sense, and it certainly doesn't make any sense here. Here's an excerpt of one of the letters in the book. August 12th. When I finished putting the girls to bed, I walked away and said, "That's the last time I'm going to be tucking my babies in." Isn't it weird how I look back and what I remember so much is Shanann's face getting all black with streaks of mascara? All the weeks of me thinking about killing her, and now I was faced with it. When she started to get drowsy, I somehow knew how to squeeze the jugular veins until it cut off the blood flow to her brain, and she passed out. The girls were just kind of running around the house and watching me with scared looks on their faces. Bella started to cry, and when she did, Celeste started whimpering. What a nightmare it was. All of this starts in June, around June 11th. This is when Shanann Watts posts this video of her announcing her pregnancy. The video where she's wearing the "Oops, we did it again" t-shirt. Chris seems very happy here.
We did it again. So pink means...
That's just the test.
I know. I just said the pink is going to be girls.
I don't know. Just the test.
That's awesome.
He could be acting somewhat here. Now, I want to just add that, especially Hollywood and just most lay people are misinformed, and Hollywood has done a good job of misinforming people about sociopaths and psychopaths. The misconception is that they do not feel emotions. Now, psychopaths and sociopaths can feel emotions. They just do not know how to make emotional connections to people. For example, if someone is crying at a funeral, a sociopath may not really understand why this person's crying. They understand the logic that someone is dead, and this person is no longer going to be in the world and in the lives of the people who love them. But they are not going to get moved to the point of crying, and they're certainly not going to cry along with someone because there's no emotional connection there. But they can feel excitement when good news is told to them, but it just may not be on the emotional level that the rest of people without these disorders would feel. So right around June 11th, June 12th, the second week of June, we are now, this is about the time where little Bella is seen in the video that Shanann posted on Facebook. This is the, I believe this was June 14th. This is the "My Daddy is a Hero" video. Little Bella with the brown eyes singing, "My daddy is a hero, my daddy is a hero." It ends with "Daddy, Daddy, I love you." These are the same eyes that looked into her daddy's face as he was killing her. And this is, of course, when Nicole Kessinger, the 30-year-old mistress of Chris Watts, and I'll call her a mistress because she called herself a mistress in Google searches. This is when they become interested in one another at that point. This is right around Father's Day 2018, and this is when the video of Chris, the video about Chris is posted on Shanann's Facebook page. This is the video, one of the more well-known videos in the case, and this is the one where Shanann calls him the best thing that's ever happened to her. Things are going well in this marriage, at least until the girls and Shanann take their trip to North Carolina. Now, this was, I think, debated a little bit as to what Chris was doing, or how involved he was with Nicole Kessinger up until the end of June, when Shanann went to North Carolina for 5 weeks. She was going to be there for 5 weeks, and Chris did join them for the last week, and that was the first time he allegedly given her OxyContin to make her miscarry. But we'll get back to that. But it's not clear whether they were an item up until then, because if you look at text messages in this case, Chris, and if you look at witness statements, especially from Nicole Atkinson, she claims that Shanann told her that Chris and Shanann had been intimate. They had an active sex life right up until I believe she went to North Carolina, and then it's in North Carolina that it stopped. So Chris may have been playing this up, meaning acting as though he was happy with his wife, and acting as though he was still pursuing Nicole Kessinger. Right around the beginning of July, she shows up at the house. They have lunch together. Now Shanann is in North Carolina at this point, and she tells police that she went there, I believe it was July 4th, to help him dial in a diet and an exercise program on an app that he was using, and they had lunch, then they left. She was in that house another time as well. Right around the middle of July, they're going on dates. They go to a car museum, and now while Chris is on some of these dates, Shanann is trying to get a hold of him. He's not answering. And right around the middle of July, it's a full-blown sexual affair. There's nude photos or semi-nude photos of Nicole Kessinger on Chris Watts' phone, saved in an app to look like a calculator. By the end of July, they're going on camping trips. They're going on sand dune surfing expeditions. And by the end of July, he's hooked. And he is hooked and head over heels for this girl. Here's a letter he wrote before flying to North Carolina to join his family on vacation. July 30th, 2018. Nikki. Wow. Where do I even start? The first day I saw you, you took my breath away. The first day I had the guts to talk to you, I got lost in those stunning green eyes. The first day we hung out at the park together, I knew I was addicted. The first time we kissed, I knew I had met the most amazing, unique, and electric woman ever. We have a lot of firsts together, Nick, and I want to keep having them with you. All night till the sun comes back, I wanna love you like that. Love, Chris. So he loves her, and she does admit that she used the word love. They told each other that they loved each other, but then she has to qualify it with, well, I said it, but not sure if I really meant it, type thing. But right around this time, while this relationship is heating up in July, Shanann is starting to ask questions. And she's texting and calling Chris from North Carolina. And here's a text here on July 10th. She says, "Are you okay? It's like you don't want to talk. I kept trying to talk and I had to dig it out of you." Watts tells her, "I'm fine, baby. The last few days at work have put a lot of responsibility on me with new people. I didn't mean to seem short, boo. I love you to the moon and back." And this is when this is just before the we are not compatible conversation. This is what Shanann says. "I miss you, and I feel like you just want to work out and run." Now, he says, "Running helps clear my head. It's a way to free it all." Shanann, of course, according to the record here, didn't buy that excuse. "I wish my husband wanted to talk to me." Now, he is willing to just move on with someone else. Now, that is the one of the strong characteristics of a sociopath. It's not necessarily, sociopaths aren't necessarily going to kill somebody when they're done with them. However, sociopaths have no problem ending a relationship and just walking away and ghosting somebody, regardless of how attached the other person is. When they're done, they're done. Sociopaths will become bored very easily and move from activity to activity and discard activities and discard people. They won't stay in relationships because of emotional bonds, because the emotional bonds that they form with other people are very superficial. So if Chris Watts is a sociopath, it would make sense that if he wanted away from his wife, wanted out of that marriage, he had no problem just walking away from it. And this is about the time where there's some face-to-face conversations that are happening in North Carolina, and these are more of Chris Watts' attempt to break away from his marriage, or he's laying the foundation for something. He may certainly just be looking for ways to cause uncertainty in the mind of his wife. And it's working. Regardless of what he's doing, it's working. And right around August 7th, there are two text messages here. A friend named Addie. Chris told me last night he's scared to death about this third baby. And he's happy with just Bella and Celeste and doesn't want another baby. The friend replies, he's just scared. Everything will be fun once the baby comes. Addie, he has changed. I don't know who he is. This is totally left field. Why no to counseling? Totally is out of left field. August 8th, Nicole Atkinson receives a string of text messages from Shanann Watts, and again, she doesn't know what to do. This is confusion. This is August 8th. This is spoken by Nicole Atkinson to the police. Chris said, we are not compatible anymore. He refused to hug me. He thought another baby would fix his feelings. He refused couples counseling. Now, it ends with, he doesn't care that he's hurting me. He's done. He doesn't care that he's hurting me. That is a characteristic of someone who is sociopathic. Again, he is not a sociopath, has a real problem, a severe problem, if complete disregard of other people's feelings, regardless if a sociopath is causing someone harm emotionally, even physically, they do not emotionally connect to those feelings, and there's just no empathy whatsoever. So he has no problems keeping his pregnant wife, who is very scared, in that state of confusion, because it plays into his control of the situation, and he is able to carry on with his girlfriend. So here we are at the August 9th. We are less than a week away from these horrific crimes, and Shanann Watts is completely beside herself. She has no idea that Nicole Kessinger is in the picture. Nicole Kessinger knows her new boyfriend's married. She's told that they are that they're going through a separation. By August 9th, Shanann Watts pens a handwritten letter. It's a draft that she was going to give to her husband in response to the "we are no longer compatible" conversation that they had. Dearest Chris, my dearest Chris, I do not know where to begin. I am so lost for words. I can't even explain how hard this pain is. The last 5 weeks have been the hardest. I missed everything about you. I missed your morning breath, your touch, your lips, kisses. I miss holding you. I miss smelling you in the sheets. Now, this is August 9th. She is in Arizona. And this is the trip that she's on right before she's killed. Now, when she's in Arizona, Chris takes another opportunity to go on another date with Nicole Kessinger. This time, he enlists the help of a babysitter. Now, he's friends with this babysitter's father, and he says this to the investigators. I believe it's in when he was being interviewed in Wisconsin. And he claims that on August 11th, he tells the babysitter, he tells his wife, I believe via text message, that he's hiring the babysitter because he's going to the Rockies game, a Colorado Rockies game with his buddies. However, he goes on a date with Nicole Kessinger to a sports bar in Erie, Colorado, and they watch, I believe, a preseason Broncos game on a big screen at this bar. Now, he claims that he wishes he would have gone to the Broncos game because the father of the babysitter offered him a ticket. The next day, we see Shanann is in a heightened state of confusion. She plans to tell Chris, this is text of what she planned to tell Chris on August 13th. Now, this is when the quote-unquote argument was supposed to happen, or supposedly did happen. Did this conversation happen? We don't know, but this is what Shanann Watts planned to tell her husband on the 13th of August when she returned from Arizona. Quote, "Can you please tell me something? Because just like you, I'm in my head. I try to fix things and make them better, and this is making me crazy. I know that you need time. I want to give you what you're asking for and respect your space. I need some time. This place that I'm in my head, is not a good place. It's not healthy for me or Nico. I need you to help me help you. I need you to give just a little bit of what I did or I didn't do so I'm not going crazy in my head to figure this out. I know I can't fix this by myself, that we are going to have to work together." This is very telling. By August 12th, a day before Shanann is murdered, brutally murdered, she pens this draft of this speech, things that she wants to say. And this appears to be a prime example of a tactic used by psychopaths to bear their will, force their will psychologically on their victims. It's called gaslighting, and we see this a lot, and I've seen this in other cases before, and you can tell that at this point, by August 12th, she is beside herself. She doesn't understand how this relationship just fell apart. There was no signs. They were intimate. They were in love. They were having a baby. They're in a very what should be a very joyous time in their life. Instead, she says, "If this is making me crazy, I need some information so I'm not going crazy in my head. It's not healthy for me or the baby." She's starting to believe. Now, gaslighting is a psychological, it's a manipulation tool that psychopaths and probably some sociopaths, mental health professionals, please chime in, will use to get their victims, to get another person to believe that there's something wrong with them. They're going crazy. And gaslighting might even involve accusing someone of being insane, accusing someone of being over emotional, accusing someone of being mentally ill, and doing it in a way where the person ends up just like Shanann Watts was. I'm going crazy. I don't know what I did to cause I don't know what I did to cause this. She is putting all of the blame of what's happening on herself because her husband has emotionally checked out and has likely done certain things to completely confuse her, especially during that week in North Carolina. Now, we know the rest of the story. August 13th, at 1:48 a.m., Shanann returns from Arizona. Their doorbell camera captures her walking into the house. Several hours later, next door neighbor captures via his surveillance camera Chris Watts backing his pickup truck close to the garage door, followed by his actions that appear to show him loading things into the truck. I think he was a few inches away from being able to see her body, that is the body of Shanann, being carried out to that truck. And of course, we know now that, according to Chris Watts, his young daughters were transported to that oil site in that pickup truck, where they were smothered and placed in those tanks. The work of a sociopath, the work of a psychopath, or someone who just snapped. Here's a letter from Chris Watts to Sherlyn Cadle that may answer that question. Dear Sherlyn, hello again. I hope you are doing well. It's been awesome being able to talk with you on the phone, but I know the 15-minute time limit is a pain. Sometimes I get right back on the phone, but right now there are other inmates that like to be on the phone as much as I do, so I respect their time as well. How is your dad doing? I hope you're able to see him. I've been praying on that every day. Yes, that petition really blew my mind, that people really want to make me suffer like that. Even if they did ever take my pictures, they can't take my memories. An inmate from another institution wrote me about that subject and said, if they take your pictures, they would need to take the pictures from the other 500 to 600 people that have their families' pictures up in their cell, convicted of the same act. Do I feel like I should be incarcerated for the act I committed? I most definitely think so. Do I imagine myself ever doing anything like this or be a danger to society? I most definitely think not. Exclamation point. Not in capital letters. If I were to ever be released, I know I would go straight to a ministry and start going to jails and prisons and help inmates. If God led me to be ordained, I would go that route as well. I might even possibly be a chaplain. Maybe the laws will change one day. My attorney team could see I was different and knew that this was a one-time occurrence for me. They even told me that in Europe, the law is I would serve 20 years or so for homicide. And in California, after 25 years of imprisonment on a life sentence, you can be released if you had good behavior. So, there's hope for everyone to live outside the prison walls. I know physically I'm behind these walls, but my spirit is free with Christ. If God keeps putting it in your heart that there is more to the story that what the FBI has, you're correct. I don't like saying stuff like that over the phone because I never am certain when they screen my calls. I know I already told you about the vision I had before August 13th, when I was laying in bed and all the lights were on in the loft, and downstairs I felt so alone. That's exactly what happened August 14th when I was laying in bed. I am not sure if I want this in the book or if God does, but here are the things I left out. August 12th, when I finished putting the girls to bed, I walked away and said, that's the last time I was going to be tucking my babies in. I knew what was going to happen the day before, and I did nothing to stop it. I was numb to the entire world. I had literally taken my kids to a birthday party, played with water balloons, and had an amazing time. Sang songs all the way home, gave them a bath, a shower, dinner, read bedtime stories, and sang bedtime songs. And still, nothing registered. When Shanann had to be somewhere, I always enjoyed taking the girls places or playing outside because it was an opportunity to bond. And still, even the night before, I couldn't stop myself from what I knew would occur the next morning. August 13th, the morning of. I went to the girls' rooms first before Shanann and I had our argument. I went to Bella's room, then Cece's room, and used a pillow from their bed. That's why the cause of death was smothering. After I left Cece's room, then I climbed back in bed with Shanann, and our argument ensued. After Shanann had passed, Bella and Cece woke up. I'm not sure how they woke back up, but they did. It makes the act that much worse knowing I went to their rooms first and knowing I still took their lives at the location. The reason the medical examiner found Oxycontin in Shanann's system is because I gave it to her. I thought it would be easier to be with Nicole if Shannon wasn't pregnant. If the world knew all of that, I'm pretty sure a new petition would be started to have me put to death, or I would be killed in prison, or if I ever got transferred from this institution. I'm not sure if this was a spiritual visit, but I had a dream Cece was dancing next to the chair in my cell. When she was dancing, one of my folders on the chair started moving, and I thought she was in trouble. So I said, "Watch out, get away, watch out." Then I woke up. I was hoping she comes back. I hope everyone comes to visit me. I'm trying to see if I can clear my head better before I go to sleep to help. I like that John 10, verse 1 through 10 passage you sent. I wish I could have had an open ear to hear the Lord calling me back in June, July, August. If we run after sin, we won't hear our shepherd calling us. I couldn't discern between the good spirits and the evil spirits, and that eventually lodged me into a deep pit that I couldn't climb back out of. I pray that you and your family are doing good, and I pray that the Lord will keep directing us in this path. Take care and God bless. Chris. He ends the letter with a scripture, Romans 13:12. Again, how did Chris Watts believe he was going to get away with killing his family? And were these horrific acts the act of a sociopath, a psychopath, a malignant narcissist, or just someone who's plain evil? I believe the fourth version, while we will never know if accurate, speaks volumes. We'll see you next time.